Hey, welcome everyone to the ArchiCAD User Monthly Webinar for February 2023. My name is Eric Bobrow, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Kristian Bursell of CADSwift in Australia. How are you doing, Kristian?
Good, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. I'm glad to have you back. Let's just make sure everybody can hear us and see the screen right now. So just type into the questions area where you're calling in from, and just, of course, let us know that you can hear and see the screen. So I see greetings from Rio de Janeiro, from Mario and Gerald Hoffman. Oh, hey, Gerald, I should have you come back on, present something as well. He's from Victoria, BC. Paul from snowy Oregon, and Stuart from Melbourne. So another one of your countrymen, and Rich Matthews from Newcastle. Okay. Yeah, we got a bunch of your countrymen, Tony DeMaze also. All right, and I won't read everybody here, but we've got definitely Australia, different people in the US, and Ian from Berkeley, from Scotland. So we're spanning at least 3 continents here. All right, we shall get going. So Kristian, I know we've talked over the years. It's been a while. Oh, by the way, let me introduce one other special guest today. This is Simone, our little 2-year-old Brussels Griffon, who is not quite sure where to look, but anyway, she will keep me company during today's session. So Kristian, you've been working with ArchiCAD and ArchiCAD for a long time, but you're different than most of the people I talk to because you're not actually focused on design. You're focused on developing tools for ArchiCAD users. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into that, in terms of, design or technology stuff.
Yeah, sure. I think I started on a similar path to most people. I went into architecture degree straight out of school. After a couple of years, I deferred because I noticed that it was all the mature age students that were a lot more educated and aware of the architecture world than someone fresh out of school. So I deferred for some real world knowledge, and in my first year, my first job, they asked me to learn ArchiCAD. They were transitioning from the old architectural drawing boards into BIM, or what was then CAD. And if you're an ArchiCAD, aficionado, it was virtual building. So they handed me the ArchiCAD manual and said, read this at night. And so I did. I lay in bed reading the ArchiCAD manual, and within a couple of months, it just clicked. The history, my father's a software developer, my brother's a software developer of some note, my mother's a mathematician. It was just sort of natural for me. And the guy who was the expert there in the company, I was better than him within 3 months, and I loved it. So I never went back to architecture. I moved around to different companies to get different types of experience, trying to exploit ArchiCAD as much as possible and the intelligence within it. I think it was my second year I started learning GDL and haven't looked back since. So worked for a few companies in different states in Australia. The last company I worked in the office was Coddy Parker Architects, who most people know of these days. They're working on some really large projects. I think they're one of the biggest firms now in Australia. And I did a lot of GDL work there, but they were still forcing me to do a lot of project work because I was so fast. So I was sort of managing teams, CAD teams, became the BIM manager there. But I was only there for a little over a year before I said, look, I don't want to do the project work. I want to develop the tools. So I stepped out, and they asked me to keep developing tools for them. And it was then, so this is spanning from sort of 2001 up to about 2006. In 2006, I stepped out and worked for them building tools, and I started doing training companies in Sydney and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2008, I started CADSwift. Global financial crisis hit, So what better time to start a company? And I think I did a lot of the training, implementation, helping companies migrate to ArchiCAD and all that sort of thing, setting up templates, setting up user guides and protocols and whatnot. And then it was sort of a couple years down the track, I really just wanted to focus on the GDL. So I started getting into also creating manufacturers content because, you know, another revenue stream. And it was, I did my first manufacturers content was 2011. So yeah, a little over a decade now. People still use that library too, interestingly enough. A lot of the libraries I created in the early years for manufacturers content are still the preferred libraries, even more than a decade down the track, which is kind of embarrassing for the other creators of manufacturers content. And it was sort of where this new, it's probably new to a lot of people, but where this methodology that I use now came from was that I saw a real problem.
By the way, this is what you're calling the Etomorph process?
Yeah, that's right. So basically it's combining manufacturer's content with generic content. So you have one object that works as a placeholder, and it can be your generic object of any type that you want, of any configuration, shapes, geometry, data. But then you can also, it also has access to manufacturers' catalogs that you can, basically get the tool to morph from a generic element into a manufacturer's content and switch it back and forth. It's a click of a button. It happens in an instant.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at this. I think it'll become more real as we take a look at it. I'm going to make you presenter so that you can share your screen and we can take a look at that. By the way, for all of you who are on, just feel free to post a comment or a question. If you see anything that you just really like, wow, that's cool, post that. But questions like, how do you do that, or what options are in this tool, please post them in the GoToWebinar questions, or if you're in my ArchiCAD space under coaching calls. You then present. All right, so you can go ahead and share your screen. Okay, so we are now seeing.
You're looking at the ArchiCAD now. You can see that clearly.
Yeah, we're seeing the ArchiCAD, and as you were telling me before we got started, since you're not working on projects, this is not a real project. Obviously, it's just a bunch of parts. But this is sort of your current workspace where you're actually playing around and developing tools, checking them out. So give us a quick overview of the different things, because we see parking layouts, we see, different things.
Sure. Okay, so this is still ArchiCAD 21. The GDL hasn't changed significantly. Well, there is one thing that's changed significantly, and that's the dictionaries, but I don't absolutely need them right now. And I still do have clients that are in ArchiCAD 22 and 23, so it's still quite useful to create all the content in 21, although I would love to be creating it in 26. That would limit access, so I'm not going to do that. Yeah, so this is the biggest one you see here. This is the new parking matrix tool, where you can basically create your whole parking design with a single tool. So you can see these are numbered. I won't go into this tool too much.
Can you just pull something to make a change and show what that's doing?
Yeah, you can see there's lots of hotspots. So we can change parking bay types using little nodes here. So that's the disabled. We've got different types of parking bays, and what you can do is you define within the object, you define the dimensions, the scope of the dimensions of that bay and how it works, and you can create your own bay types. So you can say, I want to create a motorcycle bay, and all motorcycle bays are this size, or I want to create, disabled, parents with pram, car wash bays and all that sort of thing. There's also, you can put column spaces in between them, so you can turn on columns and create spaces between bays.
So without going into a full demonstration, can you just pull one of the main ones to get more units on there?
Yep. So this is just this one. So you can just drag this out and put as many units as you want. You can also curve them. Let me just see. Okay, so you can curve the bays. And this is a single object, so each element is independent of the others, and they're numbered, and you can insert more bays in between, so you can really control the logic of your parking design.
Now, does this show up in 3D as well?
Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. Can you slope it?
3D. Yeah, there's slope, so you can see that one's actually sloping at the moment. So you can slope it in both directions and all that sort of thing.
Okay,
it's one of the things.
This one part of a particular library?
It's part of the white library, and I think it's part of this circulation library as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the circulation library and part of the white library. So the white library is everything.
All right. So you have a bunch of special purpose library collections, you know, like circulation, I'm sure has to do with the parking as well as other, some sort of landscape.
Yeah, circulation is, so it's parking, there's a ladder object, there's a car ramp in there. There's also, this might be more specific to Australia, but there's turning circle calculations and things like that. So vehicle sweep paths.
All right, so you charge a certain amount for each one of those. You can find information on the website, and then you have the white library, which is all of them. And for all members, everyone who's attending today, and I assume since this is going to be a recording that you'll, at least for some limited period of time, you'll allow other people who watch the recording this next week, say, or next month, just email Kristian and you can get a 6-month free subscription for the white library, which is the entire collection. And then I guess you're going to be showing us in detail the plumbing library, and you'll give a 12-month subscription for that. So what is your email address, Kristian?
It's my first name, Kristian, with a K. It's a Scandinavian spelling, Swedish background. So it's Kristian and then at cadswift.com.au. Okay,
so I'll post that into the chat for all of you to make note of. But if you email Kristian and say, hey, I'd like to get the free subscriptions, I watched you on ArchiCAD User, then Kristian will make the arrangements for that. Now, by the way, if someone has it for 6 months or for 12 months and doesn't renew, do the library parts just stay there, can't be edited? How does it work?
Yeah, that's right. It'll stay in your project. So if you've actually used it in a project, it'll stay in your project. It won't disappear or anything nasty like that, but you won't be able to edit it any further. So the element will still be usable in that it's still part of the project, but you won't be able to continue to edit it further.
Okay, all right. So anyway, just wanted to share that, nice offer that Kristian has. So go on and tell us about a couple other ones. I know we want to focus on the plumbing and the Etomorph thing, but this was done with traditional GDL scripting, right? So you have a whole bunch of parameters in the library part, and you then have a lot of things that can just be manipulated literally on screen by grabbing the handles, but ultimately it allows you to configure, in this case, a whole bunch of parking, sections in a coherent, systematic way. Give us an example of something else that we'll take a quick look at before we get into plumbing.
Yeah, sure. I will say also, using this as a reference, all these elements are schedulable in all the different little bits of data. So one of the great things about the parking bay element is you can see if you're meeting the project requirements as to how many disabled bays you have, how many bays you have, and so on. And that's sort of, I still do have a background as someone who managed projects, managed the CAD side of projects, or BIM side. I was still called a CAD manager when I stepped out. It wasn't called a BIM manager yet. So I know basically every little piece of the process that people really need to get the most out of an object, and I try and fulfill all those elements. So a couple others. So that's the ladder tool. It's started as a roof access ladder, and it's just morphed into all the different types of ladders. What sort of configuration? We don't want that. We won't worry about that. That ladder tool at the moment is probably in a very strange configuration, but you can have a look on the website as all the different configurations that element can do. This is our car ramp object, which can do all your different sort of curving ramps. It can do a spiral. It can do just a U-shaped ramp and all that sort of stuff. And it automates all the your gradients and all that sort of stuff as well. All this text is automated, part of it, and intelligent. Everything's intelligent. There's nothing dumb in this. It's sort of mathematician sort of background. I like to do things as smart and as automated as possible. These are the sealing tools. There's 2 examples of it here. This is just the standalone, but this is the zone accessory one as well. So you can now place this really complex sealing element that's got all your different edging and paneling and
show it in 3D, and that.
Maybe I need to use some different textures, but you can see the different levels here. So we've got everything from, and you can turn off different aspects. You don't have to show all of these elements, but you've got everything from the panel to the edge treatments, your bulkheads, the frames that hold the panels, and the timber frame above that holds that. And I don't have the hangers turned on at the moment in this element, but you even have the little hangers that hang down from the frame element to the panels and all that sort of thing. So it's quite an intelligent.
To a white view, you know, under the view menu, switch it so we get rid of all those funky colors. View, 3D view options, and then just switch it to the white model near the bottom. Now that just is less distracting for anything like you know, where the textures are missing.
Okay.
It's actually just easier to even see the geometry.
Yeah, that was almost giving me a headache with all those different textures and things. So yeah, it's a fairly intelligent and complex tool, and obviously you can turn off individual sections. You know,
can you just open up the dialog just so we see sort of the basic way that's approached?
Sure. Activate that license. So here you have where you just sort of set the panel arrangement, you know, equals, different joints, spacing, and all that sort of thing. I should probably expand the size of that element. And then you basically go through this menu and control each of these different elements independent. So this is just a graphic. So you go to your frame, and your frame settings up here, hanger settings, main channel, spring tee. So you got different profiles and all that, cornice and bulkhead, and then the panel settings as well, and then even the panel gap.
Mm-hmm. And then basically, and then the boundary is set either manually with those hotspots, which you can have as many polygon elements as you want. And then you also said it can pick up a zone. So if you actually put zones in a room, it'll pick that up.
That's right. So this is, you have the sealing tool, the original sealing tool. And this tool, I'm not sure how many of you online were part of this process, but this was something that was actually crowdfunded by ArchiCAD experts around the world. I think it was originally requested by a couple of guys in England, like the Bond Bryan guys, Rob Jackson, and a couple others. And then yeah, everyone got together, and a lot of the people from Sweden as well, and Link Architecture. That's where this image comes from. This is one of their projects. Got together and sort of funded this tool, and so they all use this quite successfully at the moment. So yeah, the zone thing was sort of like, zone accessory tools are fairly easy to script from a GDL code's perspective, and so I, you know, after sort of a couple of years and working on other tools, I quickly got onto that because it's Placing elements, manipulating elements is the hard part, is the tedious process. So when you can just sort of magic wand a zone and it's there instantaneously, and then you've just got to go into the interface and set up your design, it's really quite fast.
So
and,
let's just talk for a minute about, just from a high level, what I see you doing, Kristian, is you're helping users with relatively complex design challenges. You know, we can all do a ceiling structure like this with the raw tools, you know, different slabs and beams and things like that. But having a systematic approach where you sort of set some parameters up and it creates all the pieces and has the flexibility to match, you know, all common configurations that are needed, I think is a great time saver. And it does allow for more experimentation. I mean, you can obviously switch some parameters around and very quickly a whole bunch of things adjust. And that's the brilliance both of the GDL, you know, the components, the system that ArchiCAD has, and of developers like you who go, oh, okay, let me add a parameter for that. And, you know, just make this selectable, you know, configurable. So this is one other example of a specific library available separately, but also part of the white library. Now you've been developing some stuff that's you call the Etomorph approach. You want to show us an example of that, or just go straight into your plumbing fixture thing?
Yeah, so the Etomorph, which stands for Element Data and Anatomy Morph. This is something that
Element data and what?
And anatomy.
Anatomy.
So it's another word for geometry, but I had to turn it into a word, so I couldn't call it, well, edge morph. I probably could have called it anyway. We're not absolutely set on all those names. This is still, you know, by the time we launch the cloud system, we'll have come up with a name, but it'll most likely be Etomorph.
Okay. All right. So show us an Etomorph framework.
Sure. So the way this worked, just a tiny bit of background on that is when I was a few years into working on manufacturers' content and also having all my generic objects, I saw a massive disconnect and an issue, you know, compatibility, the synchronicity of elements, same parameters and all that sort of thing. You might have your generic tap that you're scheduling in a way, but then you bring in a manufacturer's tap. This is tap as an example. But they don't have the same parameters, so you can't coordinate it. And the process was arduous and expensive. So I wanted to try and find a way, and I think it was 2014, I discovered that ArchiCAD object can actually talk to to XML files, external XML files. So I thought, oh, I had to do a project, actually a plumbing project for a piping company in the UK, Blucher, I think that's what they're called. And they sent me this database of thousands of components. And I'm like, if I try and do this a normal way, this is going to take me years. So I started exploring this communication with external databases. They had a very detailed database of all the different sizes of all the different aspects of their components. I thought, if I could create something that could just read this, I can get this project done in a month or so. And I did, and that's how it worked. I was using text files then. I spoke to a few ArchiCAD experts, and then one guy, Tony Krepler here in Australia, who many of you may know. He said you really need to look at the XML, and that was revolutionary, because the thing is, with a text file, you need to reload it every time you update it, where the XML, it's a instantaneous communication. I thought, this is magic. So I started working with that. I started building generic objects that could assume any geometry, and that geometry would be controlled via this external data. So what that's resulted in, and I will go to the plumbing object for that to show you. Might just, in case I make a mess of things. I might just make a copy of this in case I just sort of edit it too far and want to go back to the start. This is the new interface I'm working on. It's not quite complete at the moment. I've completed this aspect, which is the spout aspect of the plumbing element. But if we go back to the original, let's see. So I'm a back-end developer. I'm not a front-end developer, and it's been made very clear to me over the last, well, almost decade, that my interfaces are not really intuitive. I kind of build this a lot of capabilities in the back end, and I just open it up to everyone to get access to those parameters, and it can be a little overwhelming. So I've been trying different interfaces and working on different things. So if we go back to the start of this element, so this is one of the interfaces I tried before. So what you have here is you have access to, these are the types. So you set bench, wall, so on. And then you set, this is actually the configuration of the tap. Is it single? Do you have two? Is it vertical? Is it a side mixer or a top mixer? And then you get access to a catalog of elements. Now, the nice thing about this is that you can control this. So if I show you a different view, this is just sort of an easy way to access the catalog quickly. If you go into the next page, this is more where the configurator works, where they can configure it. So here's your taps, positioning, and all that sort of thing of those taps. And then we go to what we called the designer menu, and this is where you get basically just access to the catalogs. So these are catalogs of pre-configured elements within this project. So if I can just jump to this element. Let me do a refresh to get that data all working properly. I've probably got some things working on, but because I've been messing around with this tool quite a lot.
Do you have the catalog option working? Because it looked like you'd be able to choose something from a catalog.
Yeah, this is the catalog. So this is the catalog. This is the built-in catalog that you can actually edit yourself.
Select a different catalog, overall thing rather than individual components.
So these are the two catalogs we have in here at the moment. They're built in to the tool. But each component also has its own catalog. So this is the tap aspect, and the catalog within there. So there's only a few elements in there. You've got the spout catalog down here. So we have access to, I think what I need to do now is I just need to go back and, download the latest catalogs. Let's open this up so we can see. So we have download. So these are your little download buttons for catalog elements.
Okay, so these catalogs are going to, the intention is to have manufacturers contract with you to create versions of their, elements that can then be described, with different options. Hey, you have it with this tap or that tap, but it's the same family of faucets or something like that. And so there's some programming that goes in to create the model, and then there's programming that goes into do the controls. So right now you have how many manufacturers, in
this tap object? We don't have manufacturers. We haven't even contacted manufacturers about this aspect yet. Kind of, we're at this point where it's the chicken before the egg sort of story. We need to have this cloud system built for the whole system to work perfectly. The only manufacturers we have on board at the moment are for the window and door tool, and we have ASA Abloy in there at the moment, and we've got another Australian manufacturer who's just come on board with that as well. And that's an interesting story because that Australian manufacturer is actually an architect firm, an ArchiCAD using firm, that have decided to become a manufacturer because they can't get decent coordination on their projects with the manufacturers. So they've gone and purchased a timber profiling factory, and they're now building their own window and door units at the moment, and they're going into joinery, and they're going into paneling and things like that as well. So they're going to be doing ceiling and wall panels and all that sort of thing as well. So they're really, it's kind of this, it's the supply chain issue. It's the digital building supply chain that they're really trying to connect. And for them, it's a massive thing for their productivity and their efficiency. They're not a massive firm. This is not a really big multinational firm. This is a fairly medium-sized, well, you'd even say small to medium-sized firm.
So let's talk about the advantages of this approach from the user perspective as well as the manufacturer perspective. From the user perspective, it's clear that there's a lot of flexibility here, and you aren't limited to just, you know, in the standard ArchiCAD library, whatever they have, how many different taps, you know, they have 10, 20, whatever number of taps. You have, well, essentially could be an infinite number. Now, you mentioned the thing of having generic components that are set up as part of an initial design and then ultimately swapping them out for manufacturer specific purchase criteria, right? So the idea here is that you can create something that the client will go, yeah, that looks pretty good. But as an architect, you're saying, well, we'll find something that's close to that. We'll find something that looks like that or functions like that. And we'll swap those in and we'll get pricing on that. Or the contractor will specify, hey, let's get this particular supplier. And you want it to be able to swap very easily without having any big issue. Now, for a small residential context, like, you know, you have 2 bathrooms or whatever, no big deal. But when you're doing multi-family or, you know, office, hospital, other larger things, then of course this can be a much bigger question. Or even just in an office doing lots of different projects quickly. So I can see the benefits of doing that. How do you see the manufacturer benefiting from it, and why would they sign on? Is it because a little bit of work on the back end allows them to use it in ArchiCAD as well as other tools like Revit?
Yeah, this is the amazing thing. And when I started actually building tools using this XML feature, which is, you know, there's a lot of coding, a lot of complex coding that needs to go in to be able to create this. These objects are very similar to Parametric within an object, within a singular object. Actually, I built these, the first version of this as my sort of solution for what they were trying to do with Parametric before Parametric came out. I didn't know they were working on it. And I got this working because I thought we really need somewhere where people can just select pieces of geometry. Let me just, it seems that in the middle of my coding, I'm not quite finished with something. So some of the arrays are not calculating here. That's because I'm still in the middle of coding this element, manipulating it. So I'm just going to cancel that. I'll go back into it now, and I'll just show you very briefly. Let me turn this function off here. So if we go down to the design, so this is the organization. There should be numbers here of how many taps you want to turn on as well. Part of my coding is sort of broken a little bit of this, so it's something I can fix very quickly, but I won't do it now, obviously. So if we have a look at the tap element, and I'll go to the page for that so we can see just that. You have 2 aspects. There's 4 separate pieces of tap geometry that you can create. I have to put a limit somewhere. But you can have multiple versions of these pieces. So basically you're working with base geometry. So you're nominating here the matter and the void, right? So solid geometry and a way to cut that geometry as well with a void of some sort. I'll turn that void on as well, but it's basically the same sort of thing. So you're nominating whether you're using an extrude or revolve or a tube. Okay, these are sort of the three main pieces of geometry that people won't have too much problems working with. We could go into all sorts of different prism types, but you really need to understand GDL to use those things.
Well,
So
can you just show a simple manipulation? It's one thing to say, hey, you have all these controls, pick one of them, make a change, let's see what it does.
Okay, sure. Let's go to, so this is a revolve at the moment for the tap. I think I've got that one worked out. Should we do this out? So
one that's dramatic, or at least very visually, you know, we can see the difference.
sure, okay. Oh, it's because I turned that void on, that's why it was showing that. So I'll show you this one. Let me just make sure it's not locked down. Okay, so this is a little quick panel to the catalog as well. So different elements from the catalog.
We'll pick another element on the catalog just so we can see how it swaps.
Okay, let me just make sure I've got the right catalog in here. So this is the download button to update the catalog. That's an upload button, so you can obviously upload your own modifications to the catalog. Okay, so if I click the classic basin, all right, you see that's a different profile there, different shape. Let's go down to lever spout. So there's another one there. Modern sink, and then obviously in those other pieces of the interfaces, you have access to all these through nice graphical images. So you don't have to sort of work on the names here. You can go to the nice graphical images. But if I wanted to modify something like that, so I'll do that now as well. So we unlock that because let's say this is the base of what we want, but we want it to be, we want to square off maybe this profile here, and maybe we want to extend it or shrink the tap a little bit. So if I unlock that, then I change my guides to component guides so I can see them in 2D. There's a little bit of a positioning thing here. I'll just show you how that looks at the moment. Must have 2D representation. Get rid of that 3D projection. Let's go back to the spout. Click OK. Okay, so these are all the little nodes that you use to change the shape. Obviously, that's the spout path there. This is the tap next to it.
So let's just stop for a second. You made one switch, which I want to explain to people. You had been showing a top-down view as the symbol, which of course is pretty convenient. Here now we're showing control points that obviously relate to radiuses and, you know, lengths of things, etc. And you're doing it in a 2D view where you can literally pull these things and adjust them. So this is a setting where you said, hey, let's switch out of realistic mode and let's go to drafting mode where we're able to manipulate. And so if you were to manipulate, can you make that shorter? You know, just show us how you would make the extension, you know, from the tap to the end of the where the water comes out, make that shorter. Can you do that?
Yeah, sure. So these are the nodes here. So let's just sort of say you want to adjust this one and bring that up to there. Now, if we have a look at this in 3D, you can see we've now got a much shorter element. That tap's got that void cutting out of it. That's why it's sort of showing up like that. And just to demonstrate that again, if we want it to be longer, longer. We're not going to go past this point because this point controls the final face. I'll actually show that. Let me bring this point out over here and you'll see that it actually gives us an angle on that. Okay. So now it's longer and now it's got that little angle because that last point of ours is somewhere out here. So you're controlling the direction of that actual final face as well.
So you have numeric controls of things, but you can, in at least many cases, just go and drag things to visually change them. So very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so this is obviously a work in progress, and as you mentioned, you're continuing to program it, put in more functionality, and try to simplify the interface, or at least make the interface as usable as possible. I'm seeing some comments here I wanted to pass along. So Craig Vaughn says this is genius, lots of potential. Nicole Kucera has, I don't know if that's maybe Ditto or something like that. But who is Andy Bunbury says, who is the Australian company? That's where I am. So I think this might have been when you were saying this was for you were doing some work for a company that isn't that large, that bought the timber framing facility.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm still confidential in that regard. Sorry. They'll be sending something out soon, though. We're sort of getting to a stage where we're completing a lot of their content, and they will start be sending those elements out. But they're an ArchiCAD firm who are now producing their own windows and doors in their own factory,
Right.
and coordinating that whole process start to finish. And so basically, and this is something that you spoke about, which I didn't sort of get to, is sort of the benefits as well for the manufacturer in the process. And this is what they're looking at, is the data, because it's XML, machine readable, most applications can read XML data. We can actually use the data that controls your content in ArchiCAD, goes straight to the manufacturer, and can be plugged in straight into their APIs as well. So if they've got an API application app, however you want to term it, if they have an app for their estimating, an app for structural analysis, or just compliance with their restrictions, then this data can go straight into that, and they can get automated feedback on whether what you're creating complies and how much it's going to cost. So you could have this, I mean, this is obviously for taps and spouts and things like that, the cost is a lot more fixed, and you're not customizing that sort of geometry generally of a manufacturer, unless you're getting a unique part built, which is really cool. You can do with this as well, and there are companies that do that, manufacturers that build custom components, obviously. But you could basically sort of assemble a shop front glazing element, and with a click of a button, that data gets sent into their application via the cloud system, and then the response from their application comes via the cloud system back into ArchiCAD. So effectively, within an instant, you can be testing the various prices of the componentry that you're creating. Now, I know when I was modeling glazing elements, the cost of it was never came into it. It was never a part of the project. Someone else had to deal with that down the track. But if you are a smaller company, or if that is your role, then you can very quickly start to manipulate this and be communicating automatically via shared data with the manufacturer to get estimations. I'll say estimate, you could get exact costings, but we'll call them estimations because things always change. And things like structural analysis. So say you've got a glazing element and it's 3 meters high, and you're using 6 mil glass, or a thin glass, and you send that data to the manufacturer's application says, no, you can't use 6 mil glass here because we can't span 3 meters with 6 mil glass. You need to use 8 mil glass. Then that information comes straight back to you in ArchiCAD in an instant, saying you've got to use 8 mil glass here or reduce the height of this component. So you'll be able to get that sort of automated communication with the manufacturer. Okay. And then when it's more complex, you can have, there can be someone at their end looking at the application, looking at the data that you've sent, and there can be the human input saying, because not all applications can know absolutely everything that needs to be done. So sometimes you need an engineer in there sort of saying, you need to do this, this, and this, and they can manipulate that data, send it back to you the way it should be, and your component in ArchiCAD automatically conforms to what is required from their product.
Okay, sounds like a very interesting extension of the whole interoperability, multiple, experts working on different domain areas. We're certainly the whole idea of having your architecture, your structure, and your, mechanical systems coordinated in a single model. This is one step, along there on detailed design configuration. So Andy, I'm just going to suggest that you email Kristian, and then Kristian can at least let you know when the things are public, and
I can contact the company as well and ask if they're happy for me to pass on their details. And if they're happy to do that, then I'll do that. I just haven't got permission from them at the moment to.
Yeah. So I do have a question or a comment from Steve Nickel. Saying for us, we don't need specific manufacturers so much as more options available in ArchiCAD. For example, are you doing door hardware also, as an example you could use? So, I know that you have your infinite openings tool, which has, the doors and windows, and particularly can configure interesting shapes and ganging of different units. And I'm assuming you have different hardware for the doors as part of that.
Yeah, so that's something we haven't quite completed the hardware aspect. We do have the tools ready to go. It's just a matter of time of sort of pulling that macro in. So the fundamentals that control this, the geometry and of this element is actually exactly the same. I mean, this tool it's almost like a rebadging of the same tool, but it's exactly the same as our infinite electrical tool. It's exactly the same as our the tool that actually started this whole configuration of elements was what we call infinite anything. So I like to be a little bit humorous with my names. For mathematicians, humor is probably not very funny to other people. But we do have a tool called infinite anything. I just like the combination of the word infinite and anything. It's and this is I was playing around. So this is a handle here actually. So I'll just show you that in 3D that I've been playing around with. So this is infinite anything, and this is just a matter of you can manipulate all these the extrusions and the revolves to create the shapes. Obviously, like the plumbing tool that you saw, there's multiple pieces of geometry that you can add with multiple different shape types. So it's fairly extensive. And the plan is basically to pull this infinite anything macro as a macro into infinite openings to control all your geometry there. So you could effectively open up this tool. This was the original one. So this is probably the most primitive looking of them all. Let's go into our catalog. See, I haven't even saved pretty images for these catalogs yet. I've got it on the designer menu. Okay, so these are just elements, element 1 to 8. So you've got 8 different elements. Each element can have multiple pieces of geometry. You could effectively come into infinite anything, create your hardware, your door hardware, save that to the catalog, then go into infinite openings, open it up, go to the handle, the hardware aspect of infinite openings, and that component that you saved here will then exist in infinite openings. So you can then apply it to that tool, or it will also exist within infinite joinery. So you could apply it to your cupboards if you're doing joinery hardware as well as glazing hardware.
So for things like door hardware, I mean, I can imagine that someone, could be you, could go into 20 different door manufacturers from around the world and pick out, I'm just going to say a few dozen different common variations, create them so that an ArchiCAD user could say, yeah, that looks pretty much like what I want. And then they get that. And then, of course, they can make it a little longer, a little thicker, a little this or that.
Yes.
What people do not want, Kristian, is start from blank and pull a whole bunch of node points to create it, because you could create morphs. If you're going to do that, you might as well just use morphs, right? But if
That's
you
right, and it's far more efficient to use morphs. Doing this from scratch, and if I was to show you one of the shower elements that I did, that is a shower on a rail with, you know, it's got the hose element, and then it's got a rain head over the top as well. I think that took me close to 2 hours to configure, and it actually kind of did my head in because I kept getting confused as to where I was. So the intention is not so much with this that you can create manually anything you want. It's more that it can be anything you want it to be, and we will put in processes to make that process as efficient as possible. So obviously I create a bunch of standards in the built-in catalog that go out that will cover most of the things that you want. And then you can select one of those standards and slightly manipulate it if you like. But also, more importantly, as you said, the idea is that you can have some base generic elements that you like, and then you can access manufacturers' catalogs and bring in, you know, real life products. And then, as you said, you bring in a real product, and then you say, yeah, this is close to what I want, but it's not exactly what we're using for this project, and I can't find exactly what we're using for this project. So you go in and you unlock that element, turn it into a custom item, so it's no longer locked to the manufacturer's data. You manipulate the pieces that you want to manipulate, and then you save that to your generic catalog of components for your project. The other thing is, I'll just mention this quickly now, is excuse me, you don't, when you save it, you don't have to save it as, you know, the way you name it can be a project specific name. So you could call this hardware 01. So this is your main hardware. And then you might have hardware 02, or you might have external hardware 01, internal hardware 01. And then when someone comes into the project and says, oh, that's not the hardware we're using, then you just change the definition of hardware 01 and it updates across the whole project. All right. So you don't sort of call it, you wouldn't necessarily call it, name it specifically based on what it is, but more its relevance to the project. So then you get, and this is where you get, and this is what a lot of the companies that use this stuff, especially the companies that use the infinite openings and other tools, they love the QA aspect, because they can just sort of say, okay, we've come up with the frame that we're using for all our openings. It's a 70 by 30 mil timber frame. That's the project standard, right? Then someone says, no, it's actually not 70 by 30 mil. That was a round off. It's actually 72 mil by 34 mil. And it's feel like, well, we'll have to go around and change everything. It's like, well, you just change the definition of that one saved component that you've created that every object's using, and the whole project instantaneously upgrades. And you can do that even from within the schedule.
Yeah, so, that's fantastic to have those, you know, that intelligent linkage and parametric controls. So Ted Mengers asked, where did you create your interface control boxes?
Where? I'm not sure I quite understand.
Where did you create your interface control boxes? So, you know, I guess if someone has a hobby of creating their own custom GDL parts, they're probably just creating something visually and then saving it as a library part, and it just has minimal controls. When you're a developer, I know that you can specify in some scripting, in GDL scripting, it says, hey, in the interface area of this part, which is separate from where you're creating the geometry, you know, the 3D and 2D geometry, in the interface, which is the dialog box, what does this look like? So here's the interface script.
Yeah, so this is the interface script. Let me just
one area and just say this is defining a pull down menu or something like that.
Okay, so let's have a look at let's just trying to work out. This is actually probably a pretty good one. This was the latest. This is the new interface that I'm working on here. So basically what you have, so this is the infield. So this is your parameter. So that's the mounting configuration. This is the spout configuration here. So these elements, if I then go, let's just go to the preview. let's go to our presets. So that's that. When I said the mounting configuration, that's this button here. So it's a UI infield, a user interface infield, and the user interface infield has several different styles to it. Okay, so this is UI infield, and I think it's a type 2, which gives us a button and an image and a piece of text. And same thing. And then these are standard infields, which is just a very basic element.
So the term you're using is infield?
Yeah, infield.
I
So
guess
there's infield and outfield.
Short for input field.
Yeah. So you have your infield, and where's an outfield? I don't use many outfields these days because they're all just text.
I think this is probably going deeper than we need to. Let me just summarize. Basically, in order to get these things looking visual, like Kristian does routinely, there's some scripting that says it uses some built-in options within ArchiCAD's environment that says, in this area of the screen, please add this type of thing. It's a drop-down menu, or it's an input dialog box that says, you can type in a number. There are different things, and you're defining the size of it. And if it's pictures, there's a separate place where you say, hey, use this picture, and you give it a text name that refers to a picture that you've loaded into your library of interface elements. So that's how it creates the user interface that you go, oh, I can select this using this, clicking my mouse. So it's not visual. It's not a visual builder. You script something, look at it, and you say, that looks good, or I need to make it taller, or I need to move it around because it's on top of something else, right?
That's right. Nothing in GDL is a visual builder. In fact, the biggest complaint about GDL is the manipulation, the interface to manipulating GDL is quite primitive. And I understand that because I know other coding languages that it's a lot more pleasant to work with. But as unpleasant as it may be, as primitive as it may be, it's still extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Interfaces, you're limited with interfaces a little bit. It's very rectilinear sort of thing. You can't do nice little curvy lines and stuff like that in an interface in that, unless you save an image of a curvy line. But it gives you all the buttons and functions and links and parameters that you need to operate.
Yeah. So let's go back to some visual things, but Ted says thank you. So we answered his question. Let's see, and I'm just looking at comments from Steve. Yes, based on maybe half a dozen manufacturers' products. I've got this right. So I'm just going to give you the feedback, Kristian, that you're focused certainly on creating a versatile, sophisticated tool in all of these areas that gives a wide range of functionality, that allows communication through both automated things like the XML files, as well as graphical interface where you pull something, select, type in a number, and it does things. So you're creating this amazing resource. In order to make it usable for ArchiCAD users, or more usable, what you'll need to do is at certain points say, I'm going to stop programming this darn thing. I'm going to create content for it, or get somebody else, on your team, or as an outsourced, resource to go and do research on manufacturers and create a bunch of sync taps, create a bunch of doorknobs, create a bunch of this, create a bunch of that. Now, I'm sure you've done that to some extent, but if you put in more effort on that, then people would go, wow, I got to have that tool because I can choose from 50, 100, or 200 sync taps, and some of them are pretty close to what I want, and so the XML, all that interchange, I mean, that's fantastic. But if you want to get it out where people go, I got to get that, then just have a demo, like when, in terms of what we're doing here. And I invite you to come back, in 3 months or whatever, and give me an update and say, all right, what we've got now is this catalog. It's not all based on manufacturers. It's just based on some typical things.
Yeah, sure. Definitely understand that, agree, and am also already working towards that end. So the objects, I think I've basically created all the objects that I plan to create for now. Maybe there's a couple more that I need to do, but they'll all be very similar to this and won't take much coding. They'll just be sort of a rebadging, and slightly different catalogs, and things like that. They're the two weaknesses that I am very well aware of. Well, there's three, but I'm sure there's multiple weaknesses, but the three that I'm aware of, number one, we need this cloud system for the communication, so that's getting built. Soft launch maybe May, June, and then official launch in towards the end of June, early July. That's all on track and looking wonderful at the moment. The other thing, which is like I spoke about, I've received a lot of criticism for the interfaces and things like that. And I think the big part of it is also the third one, having these catalogs will probably negate some of that interface issue anyway. But I'm trying to come up with interfaces over the next sort of couple months, and that's why I'm working mainly with this tap tool to work this interface out. And this is not just my own interface that I've come up with. It's coordinated consulting with a lot of the users of the tool and things like that. He said, look, we really need it to work like this. So once I get this interface to a happy place, which should be within the next couple of weeks, I will then start to replicate that across the board with the other tools, and that won't take too long. And once that's done, then yes, populating the catalogs with whatever you're going to need, all the typical styles, even going through a manufacturer's catalog and recreating all their stuff to a certain extent, but just not badging it as theirs, because obviously I can't promote something that's I'm not permitted to do. I can't. I can't.
Okay, so then I'm going to say that what we've seen
when it's
today,
not.
So I'm going to interrupt you just a second. So what I'm going to say, what I'm seeing today is a technology preview. You're showing, the capabilities of the system. And I must say to everybody, last week, Kristian sent out an email to his list, and I'm on your list. And I thought, wow, there's some cool stuff. I haven't talked to Kristian for a while, so I just reached out. I said, hey, Kristian, you want to be a guest? I don't have anything lined up for this month's webinar. And he said, yeah, why not? Sure. So it wasn't like Kristian came to me and said, I've got a thing, it's all ready to go, I want to spread the word. It was more like, yeah, I'll do you a favor, Eric, I'll show you what work in progress. And it's substantial progress, but it's it's not ready for the big announcement. So this is a preview. So we'll have you come back, whether it's in 3 months or whatever time frame, and show us, some stuff that's, you got the catalogs with a bunch of parts, and your interface is working, and you have a little, practice session to say, all right, I'm going to demonstrate these 18 things, and what you're going to demonstrate, and I'm not throwing things out to you at, hey, can you change this?
This is a very, very organic sort of presentation and all that sort of thing. And it is, I suppose it's that sort of the mind of a back-end developer is I think people are kind of interested in seeing this sort of stuff and seeing what's about to happen, and understanding the integrity of the back end, understanding that, these things, we can do anything. We can do it. We can do any geometry you want. We can do any data that you want. We can have this happen really quickly. And we're working on making it very easy for you to use as well.
Yeah.
And that's the idea is that we have all our ducks in a row for when we launch the cloud. So the interfaces will be polished, intuitive, and and the catalogs will be extensive that you can access as well.
Okay, so I have a few questions I want to pass along to you. Peter Wilson says, do these GDL objects require a lot of memory usage when included in a project?
No, it's quite amazing actually. We've actually reached all the limits of GDL's capabilities as far as storing data, memory, and things like that. So GDL has a limit of 1,024 parameters. We discovered that because, I mean, obviously, Graphisoft know that. The GDL coders at Graphisoft know that. But we discovered that because we reached that limit. The array data for a parameter, multiple values, has a limit of, I think it's 32,627 values. Pretty sure that's the number, and I'm good with numbers, so you can probably quote me on that number. We reached that. Reached that several years ago. So we worked all that out. I had to contact Graphisoft and say, what's going on? It's crashing now. It stopped working, and they said you've hit the limit. And that's a limit that's actually put in place by Graphisoft. It's not a limit of the software. Well, it's a limit of the software, but it's a limit that they've chosen because if things start to go, they thought it'd be ridiculous that people would want to go beyond that for starters. They think I'm a little ridiculous, but they love the work I'm doing, and they've set those limits in to keep everything working smoothly and safely. So no, these panning, scrolling, zooming in and out super fast. We did have, in fact, that's part of the change we made to that ceiling object when we did the zone tool. The calculations I had in the background for that were slowing things down significantly. Like, I mean, it became tedious because I was calculating all the intersections of all the joints with all the boundaries. And when you've got boundaries that are curving and going in all weird different shapes, and you've got to say, if the boundary does this, and if it does that, and if it does, you've got to have all these variables. The geometric algorithm for that was extremely taxing. The reason it was taxing is because I was trying to get this to send information to CNC machinery so that the data would define the exact geometry of panels. Then realized that's over the top. So I then used standard GDL things to not calculate those elements, but just have them trimmed in 2D and 3D using more basic methods. So that's why now that tool is lightning fast. But
so let me just jump in, Kristian. I think the short answer is GDL objects are highly efficient.
Highly efficient.
Just giving you an interface, create geometry and information flow, both, from the cloud and also into schedules and things like that, that at the right time deals with that information. So, he was talking about CNC, so some of you may be unfamiliar with that term, but it has to do with manufacturing things from, you send some instructions to this machine or a set of machines that actually cut and shape and do things mechanically. So all of that data is available, all of that data can be pulled, but you don't have to use it all the time. Now, ultimately what this means is you got, like ArchiCAD itself, you have the combination of extreme flexibility and detail, but very fast performance because you can control the level of number of polygons. Typically, we see slowdowns in ArchiCAD projects when you have a lot of external reference information that is trying to be redrawn, a lot of 2D line work, potentially, lots of tiny little things that you can't even see, but it's trying to carefully draw, or 3D polygons. You have organic forms like trees or landscape that's has terrain controls that are way excessive there. So what Kristian is creating shouldn't tax it at all. It should be basically only when you go into the dialog will you have all of these controls. The rest of the time, it's already figured out the 2D shape that you need to see, which doesn't have to be complex. It's just enough to diagrammatically represent things, and the 3D geometry similarly. So maybe that was longer than it needed to be. it shouldn't slow down anything from a
No,
practice.
it shouldn't. And there are measures in place as well. So we want this to have a polished look so you can do a nice render, but we also want it to be efficient in the project. So GDL is amazing. If you want to talk simple, and I won't go into this because I know I probably start to ramble on because I get excited about, you know, the more detailed technical side of things. So I'll try and control myself. But if I create a bath object in Revit, which I don't do anymore, I used to have to do Revit content because everyone kept asking for it, but now I can't stand that piece of software. If I create a bath in Revit, or let's just say tap, let's stick with this. If I was to create this tap object in Revit, you're going to end up with a file that is somewhere around 600 to 700 megabytes, right? This library, which can do any tap you want, is around 240 megabytes, and that's big for ArchiCAD, as in not big as in that's hard to compute, but you know, if I was to do just a one-off little piece, you're talking about a 12 to 15 megabyte file. The efficiency of GDL is astounding. I really don't know how they've achieved it, but they've done an amazing job. On the other side of things, as far as like, so we have issue with polygon count. So you can see this is a really nice, fine profile in here, but we can dumb that down for, you know, when you do elevation views, and that's tied into the model view options. So you can set up your model view options. I'll just go into this level of detail. What are we looking at here? We're looking at plumbing. So you can go into your model view options and you can control the level of detail of this component, and it's automated because it's model view options. You can say, okay, in my model view options for my renders, I want a resolution of 360. So that's lines per angle sort of thing. But when I go down to my elevations, I just want a resolution of 12. Effectively something, or even you could go to 4, because effectively something that is round and needs to be round in a render can be a flat element in an elevation. So it can just be rectangular. So I'm pretty sure I've got this set up ready for this. So I'll just test that for you. I always hate doing these live tests when I haven't done them before because you never know. Oh, there we go. So you can see we're changing the geometry of that thing so that when you look at that in elevation, well, these lines are ugly, so you might need to work on that. But when you look at when your elevation does a projection of that element, it's projecting a very minimal amount of geometry.
Yeah, put it down to 12 or switch it to 12, and it might probably be enough to get.
Well, sorry, I don't keep getting where I'm at. 12 is actually a standard that we used to use. So when I used to lock these elements, sorry, 12.
Yeah, so this is just an example of how configurable it is. And what Kristian just did was made a change globally that's temporary, obviously, because it's switching on the fly. But this would be, if you had 500 of these taps, they all would adjust. All the plumbing fixtures which are under that rubric, you know, would adjust. So we have some other questions here. Paul Adams says, does your door hardware include door closers, deadbolts, kick plates, push plate, pull levers, etc.?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. Actually, a lot of these elements were done when we started creating the assay alloy content. So if you go into a door object, I'm messing around with these things so much. They're all a little too complex. But let me take this one because this one looks a little more simple. You can see we've got curved glass and that. So let me just activate that license. I won't go and change that because the 3D doesn't really matter too much. We were looking at the elements. So these are the components of the door. So we've got a design, we've got a shape, we've got the frame profile, we've got mullions and transoms. They're also different profiles. We have a subframe, so that's the frame that goes around it. These are the panel arrangement and intersections, which you can turn on and off. So you can do a real crazy sort of geometry within that. I won't show obviously this whole tool, but you can have, you could basically have your mullions and transoms, you can remove sections of them. Okay, you can also skew them so they're all off on different angles, and then remove sections.
The ones that he was mentioning, you know, like kick plate or door closing.
Yeah, so if we go into the opening panel, yeah, this one. So in the opening panel, we have panel, handles, kick plates, there's a viewing panel, and there's a grill as well. So, you know, like there's
go to kick plates. Go to kick plates and let's see what you have built in.
Kick plates are very simple. You've just got an internal and external kick plate. This is all locked down. Let me just quickly go back here and customize this. Internal and external kick plates, and you nominate the height and the thickness and the material of that element.
What about dead bolts? So we don't have to show all of this, but you know, just since he listed a few things, just going specifically to them.
Yeah, sure. So dead bolts, we haven't got dead bolts in there at the moment. I mean, you know, that could probably be part of the handle. These are just the generic handle styles that we have at the moment. We haven't bought into the infinite anything in here yet, but maybe that could be controlled in there. We have signage and threshold, viewing panel grill. I'm just wondering how else you can control dead bolts. We are going to put hinges in there. We do have the one thing that you mentioned was an opener. So we do have openers as well. These are your must be locked. Yes, let's set that to custom. Okay, so we do have openers and we have various styles. So that's the positioning of the opener. Is it from the wall, external and internal, centered, frame, or is it positioned on the frame, or is it positioned on the panel? And then we've got different types: concealed, single arm, scissor arm, set square, angled, angled external. And if you go into the ASA Abloy content, let's just turn on the ASA Abloy catalog. And we have access to all their
pick something. Products. Just pick something so we can see it.
Okay, let's just turn this one on. Click that. Click OK. Let's go into the 3D. I'll probably pick the most simple one that's not going to be very attractive. So that's I'll pick another. So that's the opener there.
And you picked a four panel door, so it's, you know, not like,
yeah, it's not logical at all.
Is it, how easy would it be to switch that to just a double door instead of a 4 panel?
Yeah, sure. Let's go to operable elements, and it's probably locked too. I think this whole assembly is locked. Oh no, it's not locked. So it gets locked to the catalog. That's one of the good things about the catalog. Let's just go to a door swing single. Door swing single. Let's change the size.
Do a double, just so we see.
Double?
Yeah.
Okay. Door swing double. And let's go to the, where are we? We're going to go to the opener. And we'll choose, again, from the ASA Abloy catalog, and we'll choose one of these double configurations here. This is the push element. And we'll click OK. It's on the other side, must have been internal or external if I was already in the internal.
Okay, so the bottom line is, yeah, pretty much all of those things that Paul asked about are in there. You have manufacturer stuff, a limited amount, but you also have a lot of generic things that are available. I'm sure the way Kristian approaches things, that Paul, if you were to get this is part of the infinite openings or part of the full infinite white library, which you can get a 6-month free license for. If there's something that isn't there, you can tell Kristian, and I'm sure he'll add it to the work list there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So Yasik says, great concept and execution, needs more work, but it boggles the mind for its future capability and use across the different platforms. Great job. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm aware of all those. It even boggles my mind a little bit, but yeah, I do know it needs to be presented in a little bit more user-friendly way.
Yeah. So Paul Adams, who was the one who asked about all the door hardware, says, cool, the pieces that are in place have deep choices. Yep, definitely. So now we've gone an hour and 20 minutes. We could go longer. We could look at anything else. Is there anything else either those of you in the audience want to say, hey, what does Kristian have for X? You know, maybe he can bring that up. But Kristian, is there anything else that you think like, oh, I forgot to show you such and such because this is really cool. You know, I'd love to see anything else that you're excited about.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we covered everything. Like, it's all the important topics that what everyone says. Look, the capabilities of GDL, and I don't want to take too much credit for this. Yes, I've put the time into to develop these things, and it does. Where you can see it, it gets me excited. So it's not really an effort for me. Yeah, it's time, but I love doing it. GDL, thank Graphisoft. You know, it's amazing what they've created. Sure, it'd be nice if it was easier to work with. But I think one little thing would be to sort of say, look, you know, these tools, even though they are sort of complex to work with, there are things that you can do. Once you get used to them, they're not so complex. You look at them and you've never seen them before, you're like, whoa, you know, this is just wild. Like, yeah, it's really cool what it does, but I don't even want to touch it because it's just so over the top, too complex, you know, and I get that. There's basically a 2-week, depending on how much time you spend with the tool, there's a standard 2-week process where you're going to hate it for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, you're not going to be able to live without it. That's basically the feedback that I get from everyone. Look, large companies struggle to implement these tools because no one wants to touch it. It's like, you know, and I get that because I'm the sort of guy that once I find a breakfast I like, I don't do any other breakfast for months and months on end because I've just got my process. You know, it's just efficient. It serves me. I don't want to change it. Don't start bringing in other ingredients because I've got my thing. You know.
Yeah.
But
No,
once
great.
you struggle through that period, you get to the paradise of, you know, having all the power at your fingertips.
Yeah. So Larry Park asks, do you update existing users or current users for your libraries, you know, as you're doing development work?
Yes, and you know, at times, once again, you can tell that I'm sort of back end excited about the back end. So I used to do that a little too often, and that used to annoy people. I used to sort of make a change, go, oh, I've done this, send it out to everyone, check it out, and everyone's like, I don't have time to update all my libraries again. You know, I'm doing project work here, but I send out updates for the tools I'm working on. As they're done. So, you know, if I'm working on a tool 1 year, then you're going to get probably 6 updates that year. You'll get enough. I used to send out updates more frequently than that, but
Okay.
You would get an update every couple of months.
All right, you try to find the sweet spot between, yeah, it's once a year, like Graphisoft, and, you know, every other day when, you know, you've got something that, oh, this is cool, I'm glad that works now. Yeah, so somewhere in between, like every couple of months, you have updates for tools. So, and all existing users, you know, get those, or they're optional. You say you have to download and install them, or how does it work?
Yeah, I will send you the update, and you just basically replace your old library with the new library. And I understand that can definitely be a tedious process, especially if you're doing a lot of shared project, teamwork, and large office. And there's the issue with, you know, when I update this, is there going to be glitches? Is there going to be new bugs, errors? Is it going to mess up some of my work? And 5 years ago, I would have said yes. Unfortunately, it hurts. It's painful. But because of the large companies we work with, and because of even the companies that have, you know, like your volume builders, your project home builders who have a catalog of 300 sort of houses that they need to update when these things change, we have worked on processes to make these updates seamless. So yeah, at the moment, you now download and update it. There's nothing changes within your project. There's nothing edited. There is nothing that, you know, like if I change a method of doing things, it's not going to have an effect on your project or anything that you've got already placed. So
Okay.
we've spent a lot of effort on seamless updates.
Right. Good. Good. Gerald Teacher says, can you schedule all those accessories and add manufacturer info for each accessory?
Yes. The beauty about the catalog and the things that control the catalog, so these are the components. Let me go back into maybe the door tool. It might be a better example of that to sort of show you. Let's go to so this element, this value here is a parameter that can be scheduled. So maybe I'm going into the back end here where I shouldn't be. But you can see, so this is the component, that's the assembly, corner assembly, where are we? Mullion profiles. I'm just going to try and find that lintel, panel arrangement, openings. Okay, you really don't want to be messing around and looking at this list. I'm just sort of showing you this. So these elements, so this is the name of it. You can schedule whatever component you've selected from your catalog can be scheduled, and all the data about that component can be scheduled. So when you have a project, and this is the QA side of it, when you have a project and in your windows you're using window profile type 1, 70 by 30 mil, 90 by 45 mil, whatever it might be, and you schedule that element, then you can very quickly in your schedule say, why is that one set to custom? Why is that component set to custom? Why is this component not set to this one that we've defined for the project? And you can see that in an instant. So as you can use the schedules, not only to schedule all the components that you're selected, but also to QA the project to make sure the correct components are selected.
Okay.
And then within the schedule, you can change it. So if you've got one that says custom, you click on that and it'll give you the list of your components and go back to your window frame 01, 70 by 30 mil, whatever it might be.
Okay, so the short answer is yes, everything can be scheduled, and you can use it for both schedule reporting and for QA, you know, make sure that everything's consistent, etc. Paul Adams says, hey, Eric, it appears that Graphisoft is pushing users towards a professional subscription, which is noticeably more than the Arc Plus option. Do I know what the company is planning? First of all, I don't know what the company is planning. I'm not on the inside. I was for 20 years, but for the last 13 years now, I'm a user like, you know, all of you. You know, I'm a consultant. I train people, but I don't have any inside contacts at Graphisoft, so I don't know. I'm sure that in general, software companies are moving more towards subscriptions on all levels for two reasons. It does make things somewhat more accessible. You don't necessarily have to be spending a huge chunk to invest, but it also guarantees them a regular income, you know, and that's what keeps a company going. So just the fact that you bought ArchiCAD 5 years ago and you love it, but you haven't bought upgrades, well, that doesn't keep them going, right? So they want everybody to be on subscription. There's always, you know, some leeway, or, you know, they can have different choices from a business perspective, but I understand it. Recurring monthly income is a common refrain in terms of any type of thing. You think about Netflix, you think about anything. Yeah. Now, which brings up, Kristian, you know, just where do you see your funding coming from here? We've talked a little bit about manufacturers paying. You do have some, you know, your libraries with a subscription model. Now you have their white library, which people can get a 6-month free license for just for emailing you, anyone who's on this webinar or watching a recording, Kristian at cadswift.com.au. But what is the subscription cost for your components currently, and do you foresee that changing if you can get more manufacturers on board who, you know, are funding it?
Yeah, definitely. So that's, I mean, the end goal of this library is that it's all free. I don't, you know, that's what we're aiming for. But obviously, to do all this work, I need some sort of revenue. We are on a subscription model at the moment. That's the way all software is. We actually trying to set up the system within the cloud, so that can be a monthly subscription, so you can sort of turn it on and off for a project. So the beauty of these tools is even when the subscription has expired, the tool remains in the project in its last manipulated form. So it's not going to disappear, even though you don't have a subscription. So what that means is you can basically turn it on project by project sort of thing. That's something that we are looking at. Financially, that might not be the best idea for us because it doesn't lock people into the 12-month subscription. But that's the way everything goes, you know, Microsoft Office, Netflix, whatever else it is you're using, that's the standard. And I think we will conform to that as well. However, this is for a business side of things. It's the chicken before the egg thing. We need these tools to be funded, and the funding from the manufacturers is a fair bit more extensive, even though it's extremely cheap compared to traditional manufacturers' content, because we can create it so efficiently. I can finish a manufacturer's project using this content in 10% of the time that I can doing it the standard way. So that saving goes on to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer saves a lot. They obviously also get a lot more because they get this communication, instantaneous, you know, early in the project sort of communication. So we're saving everyone money. And then once there's enough revenue coming from the manufacturers, then we don't need the revenue from the user. And the fact is,
right now your white library, which is all of the stuff that you have created, is roughly $1,000. Is that
right.
US or Australian?
That's what? Australian. It's Australian. It's 1,024 because mathematician, I have a particular thing about numbers.
The 10th, yeah.
It's got to be a multiple of 16. It's a universal number, black hole equations sort of thing, chaos theory stuff. But it's the idea is that, I mean, if these tools were free and I had the user interfaces polished and the catalog's a little bit more extensive, I'm sure everyone would be using them. And if everyone's using them, then that's a lot more incentive for the manufacturers to come on board.
All right. So right now, if you want to start using, you meaning all of the people who watch this, you want to start using Kristian's tools, you can get 6 months of using all the tools, and just know that you could extend that 1,024 Australian. I don't know, that might be like $700 US or something like that. Is that per year?
Yes, that is per year, and it's also per ArchiCAD. Well, it's not quite per ArchiCAD license, but you need to purchase the same number of seats as you do ArchiCAD licenses, but the cost reduced significantly. I can actually very quickly, let me just show you that.
Because
we had the website crashed.
You can only manipulate with an active license. So
that's right, you can only manipulate with an active license. So if we go into where's the white library? The white library. So you can see this is the discounting price as you go. So when if you've got over 200 licenses, you're only paying $104 per license. So it's 1080, that's what it is. So one license is going to cost you 1080 a year. 2 licenses will cost you 2 times 696.77, this percentage thing.
Roughly 1,400. And 3 licenses would be 3 licenses is not much more, is like 1,460.
Yeah, it becomes really minute increments as you add another license. So
yeah, so actually 5 licenses is about 1,500, compared to 1 license for 1,080, and that's Australian dollars. So obviously for Americans, it is significantly less. So this is where you're at now, and down the line, your aim is to have manufacturers fund this, and then it potentially can be just a very nominal amount to maintain, a user membership.
Yeah, it's not a huge amount we need to reach with the number of tools we need to reach. The funding for each tool, I mean, we don't need extensive amounts of money to continue to develop these tools. So we get one manufacturer on board with one or two manufacturers on board with the infinite openings to a fairly substantial level, then infinite openings becomes free. But infinite openings probably cost me to maintain, develop, probably cost me, and I don't know if I should be giving out these numbers, but I'm a fairly open person. Probably cost me around about $40,000 to $50,000 a year to maintain. So if we get a manufacturers on board to that extent, it's probably even less than that. The tool's free, and then and with other tools, and it'll be the most expensive for me to maintain because it's the most complex. Things like the plumbing tool, once it's built, maintenance will be, basically like a 5 or 10 grand a year sort of thing that I require to maintain that tool. So it's a very insignificant amount.
So Kristian, I'm going to suggest that in your pricing table next to, make another column and make the total cost, because, I can look and say, 5 times 304 is 1520. So if you had, those numbers there, it would actually be, someone could say, oh, this isn't that much. I have 4 licenses. Oh, that's, just barely 30% more than what it is for 1 license, So
I would definitely do that. We had an issue. Our provider, the hoster of this, they had a hardware malfunction. One of their servers crashed, not digitally, it physically rotted, and it was hosting my website, and we had to rebuild the website. They had very little information, and a lot of the data on my website was not backed up. So
wow,
we lost a bit there. That's
well, anyway, just put that in so that it's just easy to see that 5 of them.
So this is a rebuild. So I've only just seen this over the last sort of couple of weeks, and I'm going, this is kind of very confusing to look at. So definitely, I'll get them to adjust that.
All right, and let's see. We'll just stay in touch in terms of a follow-up thing when you have something really ready to show publicly with good smooth demo. I mean, this was an interesting demo, but clearly there were a lot of things that you like the surface textures, the various things. So
sure,
get that going. Let's see if there's any final questions or comments here. Doug Muir says, old problem, small shops pay more. Okay, yeah, so one person is going to end up paying significantly larger part of their revenue or income to have a tool like this than the 5-person shop where it's only 50% more, and you're but yes, that is the case.
I agree. I don't think this equation that I've come up with is perfect. I think it could be a lot more fair.
Yeah, so Mark Benner says it'd also be good to show the dollar amount saved. So anyway, you put in yet another a column that would say save, whatever. Okay, well, fantastic work. I'm excited to see where you're going with this, and just have an open invitation to come back when you're ready, later this year.
I appreciate that, Eric, very much.
All right. Okay, and for all of you out there, thank you for joining us for ArchiCAD User today. If you have any suggestions for future guests, anyone else you'd like to see featured, or if you yourself have something, just 1 or 2 cool projects that you think really came out well, I'm always happy to interview, successful users, sort of see how you modeled this, how you organized your work, whatever, regardless of what version of ArchiCAD, any recent version is fine. You don't have to be on 26. And regardless of which template, I make master template, which, is a great tool, but regardless of, how you've set up your project, if you feel that, hey, this really came out nicely in terms of design and the use of ArchiCAD, always interested, and I'll take a look and, most likely be happy to interview you, whether it's for 10 minutes or 2 hours, just depending upon how much interesting stuff there is. So let's see if there's any closing comments. So Tony says, well done, Kristian, many steps in the right direction, great potential. You yes, definitely work on the intuitive user interface. Okay, and Justin Langley says, Kristian did excellent work on the Miele appliance GDL objects. So I guess he's used them. And Andy says, fantastic and exciting. Looking forward to hearing more about CADSwift. Daniel Serendi says, does CADSwift offer GDL training?
We do, yeah. It's not a big part of what we do. I haven't developed any training manuals, so to speak, but we do have a process of helping people understand GDL and getting into it. So yes, we do.
All right, so just email Kristian with a K at cadswift.com.au for information like that, as well as for your free copy, your free license for the Infinite library, which is the one that has everything, or well, and you'll also get that's for 6 months, and then for 12 months you can get the was it the plumbing, Infinite Plumbing. You mentioned Infinite Water. What the heck is Infinite Water?
Infinite Water is that tap tool. I don't like the term tap or spout. So Infinite Water is the tap tool.
All right. And then the plumbing has more stuff than just the taps, I guess.
Yeah, so it's the taps and it's basins and sinks as well. Okay. And they got that same catalog functionality, flexible geometry, easy to manipulate yourself. The sink tool is really cool with the way you can create any manufacturer's component with that tool.
Okay. What about, do you have cabinets and casework?
Yes, Infinite Joinery. So this is our Infinite Joinery tool. And we just recently put a curved corner on that for someone. So there's like a fixed panel that you can see is like one of those double waterfall benchtop things. There's a polygon benchtop, so you can actually manipulate the benchtop in a weird different shape. And there's profiles for the edges, so you can do like old traditional sort of bell-shaped profiles and or just curved edges and things like that. And it's also the options for the different components and configuration of the components within that are extensive. You can do, it does anything from a shelf and hanging rail for built-in cupboards to complex pieces of geometry and joinery for any sort of kitchen arrangement.
Right. So that looks fantastic. So it's all part of the white library, or of course available separately. So all right, well, thanks, Kristian. Thank you all for joining, and yeah, look forward to your feedback, suggestions, ideas as well. So take care, and be back next month with something new. Take care.